I wasn't supposed to look at her laptop. I've never been the paranoid type. Ask anyone who knows me, trust was the one thing I never held back in our relationship. That was the foundation Martha and I built everything on, or at least I thought we had. We'd been together 5 years, married for 3. We knew each other's passwords, but not in a weird, controlling way. It was just convenience, trust, mutual openness. So when I say I didn't mean to snoop, I really didn't. That night, she was in the shower and her laptop was sitting open on the dining table. I had just finished rinsing a mug and was walking past it to grab my phone when I caught a glimpse of her screen. It wasn't even minimized, just a tab left open in her company messaging app. Slack or some off-brand version of it. At first, I kept walking. But then I saw my name. And right next to it, a heart emoji. That stopped me cold. My stomach tightened as I took a step back toward the laptop, guilt already gnawing at me. I knew I shouldn't be looking, that there was still time to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I didn't. I stood there, my fingers curling into fists as my eyes scanned the thread. The conversation was with Jason. Her boss. It started professional enough, deadlines, slide decks, budget approvals. But then it swerved. Hearts, kisses, inside jokes that were not work appropriate. Stuff like, can't stop thinking about last night, face-blowing kiss. Next time, no interruptions. Promise, smirking face. Don't fall asleep on me again, face with tears of joy, but yes, best meeting I've had in ages. And then this. Your husband doesn't suspect anything, right? No answer to that one. Just Martha's typing indicator, then it stopped. I stared at the screen like it had punched me in the chest. My brain was scrambling to stitch together some alternate explanation. Anything. Maybe they were messing with someone else. Maybe this was an elaborate prank. Some weird corporate humor I just didn't get. But deep down I knew. My gut knew. I closed the tab gently, quietly. Like if I made a sound, it would confirm the truth out loud. She walked back in a few minutes later, towel around her shoulders, humming to herself like she didn't just nuke our marriage 5 minutes ago. I watched her from across the kitchen, heart pounding, trying to figure out the best way to say it. To ask without accusing. Martha, I said, trying to keep my voice even, can I ask you something kind of weird? She raised an eyebrow and smiled. Sure. You okay? I gestured toward her laptop. I saw a message from Jason on your screen just now. Oh, she said, casually walking over to shut it. Yeah, he messaged me earlier about the budget thing. No, I mean there were hearts. And something about last night. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, that. She actually laughed. Jason is ridiculous. He flirts with everyone. It's just his thing. Our whole team jokes like that, corporate sarcasm. You should see what he sends in group chat. It's practically an HR nightmare. She grinned, shaking her head like she was the mature one brushing off the antics of a harmless frat boy boss. I didn't know what to say. She sat down, completely at ease, and started flipping through her phone. I can show you the thread if you want, but seriously, babe, it's nothing. You're reading way too much into it. Jason's just Jason. And somehow, the way she said it, so confident, so unaffected, made me question myself. That's the part that really messes with me even now. Because for a moment I believed her. That tiny seed of doubt she planted? It took root immediately. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it really was just some internal joke. Maybe this was my own insecurity surfacing, not her guilt. I nodded slowly. Okay. It looked kind of weird. Yeah, I get it, she said with a little shrug. But I promise it's nothing. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. You trust me, right? I nodded again. Said yeah because that's what I was supposed to say. What else could I say? That I thought she was lying? That the pit in my stomach was screaming at me not to let this go? So I dropped it. Or I pretended to. We watched TV that night. Laughed at some dumb cooking show. She curled up next to me like she always did, and for a few hours I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. But something had shifted. That trust one used to feel, that effortless ease between us, wasn't there anymore. Not fully. I kept glancing at her phone whenever it lit up. I noticed how she angled it away from me. How she didn't laugh at my dumb jokes the same way anymore. Little things. But they added up. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake for hours just staring at the ceiling. Playing the conversation back in my head. Rereading it word for word in my mind. Last night was incredible. What did that even mean? What could it possibly mean coming from a boss? I told myself to let it go. That one message doesn't make an affair. That I should trust her like I always had. But trust is a weird thing. Once it's cracked, even just a little, it doesn't take much for it to split wide open. That was the first time I felt it. That tremor in my chest. That gut instinct screaming, this isn't nothing. I didn't confront her again. Not that night. Not for a long time. I tried to bury it, tried to go back to the version of us where things made sense. But from that moment on, everything she did felt different. And as much as I wanted to believe her deflection, as much as I tried to shove it into a drawer and lock it up with all the other things I didn't want to deal with, some part of me knew. That night was the start of something unraveling. I just didn't realize how fast it would all come apart. After that night, everything changed. Not on the surface, things looked the same. Martha still kissed me good morning. Still asked if I wanted coffee. Still sent little check-in texts during the day, the kind that end with a smiley face or a heart. But something in me had cracked, and once that happened, everything else started slipping through. I started noticing things I used to shrug off. The late nights at work that had gradually become the norm. The way she'd get jumpy when I entered the room, especially if she was on her phone or sitting at her laptop. How she started keeping her phone face down or outright bringing it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She never used to care, she used to leave it on the nightstand, on the counter, charging in the living room overnight. Now it was practically glued to her. And the way she started talking, that shifted too. She began using words like space, independence, and freedom, words we never really used before. Not because we didn't value them, but because we had them. We gave each other breathing room, trusted each other to exist as full people outside of our marriage. But now she said those words like they were something she'd been denied. Like she was a bird that needed out of a cage. One night over dinner, she brought it up out of nowhere. I think it's important that we both remember we're individuals, you know? Like, we shouldn't lose ourselves in being a couple. I remember blinking at her, fork halfway to my mouth. Where's this coming from? I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Nowhere. Just stuff I've been thinking about lately. Stuff she'd been thinking about. Stuff she didn't talk to me about until it spilled out sideways. That was the new pattern, me finding pieces of her thoughts secondhand, like I was eavesdropping on a conversation I was never meant to hear. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd gotten too comfortable. Maybe I'd stopped paying attention. Maybe she was lonely and I just hadn't noticed. I started overcompensating. Took her out on surprise dates. Bought flowers for no reason. Cleaned the kitchen without being asked. Hell, I even made her a Spotify playlist like we were 20 again. She thanked me. Smiled. Kissed me on the cheek. But none of it seemed to land. It was like she was half there. Like she was going through the motions of being my wife, but something inside her had already started pulling away. And then the cologne incident happened. She came home late, said they had a going-away party for a colleague who was retiring. She looked flushed, a little tipsy, but not drunk. I hugged her the moment she walked in, and that's when I smelled it. Not her perfume. Not mine. Someone else's cologne, sharp, expensive, and clinging to her sweater like it had been close for too long. I asked, gently, "You smell like someone else's cologne." She laughed, brushing it off like I'd just pointed out lint on her shirt. "Oh, probably from Rob or Jason. You know how people are at those things, hugs everywhere. The guy who's retiring is like 100 and he kept hugging everyone." 100. That was supposed to reassure me. I nodded, didn't push it. But I couldn't unsmell it. That scent followed me all night, even after she changed and showered. It clung to my thoughts. I started playing a dangerous game in my head, revisiting the past with new eyes. Things I dismissed before were suddenly suspicious. Like the time she stayed over at her coworker Jenna's after a girls' night. She said she was too tired to drive home. I remember thinking it was weird back then, she'd never done that before, but she waved it off and I didn't question it. But now? Now it felt like the first domino. There was also the change in how she dressed. It happened gradually, new clothes, more form-fitting, heels on days she used to wear flats, makeup even when she said she was just going to the office. And her gym routine became more consistent than ever, which would be great if it hadn't started feeling like she was sculpting herself for someone who wasn't me. I even started to notice how she talked about Jason. Before, he was just her boss. Occasionally annoying. Always demanding. But then his name started coming up more often. Sometimes with a laugh, sometimes with a weird kind of fondness. Jason said the funniest thing today, or Jason thinks I should go for that promotion. And then once casually. Jason's got great taste in wine. He recommended this little vineyard in Sonoma. Jason this. Jason that. At one point I asked jokingly but not really, "Do you talk to Jason more than me these days?" She rolled her eyes. "Seriously? He's my boss, not my boyfriend." I laughed. She didn't. I let it go. But the little things kept stacking up. She started sleeping with her phone under her pillow. She turned off message previews. She logged out of her email on the home computer, something she hadn't done since we bought the thing. One night, we were watching a movie and her phone buzzed. She grabbed it instantly and angled her body away from me to read it. I pretended not to notice. She typed something quickly and tucked it back under a throw pillow like it was radioactive. That was when I started watching. Not obsessively, not yet, but I started logging timestamps in my head. How long it took her to get ready. Who she said she was meeting. What she wore. Whether she came home with lipstick still intact or half-faded. Whether she kissed me hello like she meant it or like she was checking off a box. One night, I saw her staring at herself in the mirror. Not checking for blemishes. Just staring. Like she didn't recognize who she was. That one actually scared me. Because if she didn't know who she was anymore, how the hell was I supposed to? I remember lying awake in bed, listening to her breathing beside me and wondering who she dreamed about. Wondering if her thoughts ever landed on me. She stopped saying I love you first. Stopped initiating anything. The physical closeness became polite. Routine. Like she was doing just enough to keep things from tipping too far off balance. And every time I asked if she was okay, she'd smile and say, of course. Just tired. Work's been insane. That word again. Tired. I started to hate it. Because what I realized was this: tired is the excuse you give someone when you're trying to buy time. When you're hoping they'll stop asking questions. When you want them to sit still long enough for you to figure out what the hell you're doing behind their back. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the thing is, love makes you blind. Suspicion makes you see too much. And when you're caught between the two, it's like drowning in your own head. Every look becomes a code to decipher. Every text tone a red flag. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating right. I started withdrawing from my own life, ducking calls from friends, zoning out at work, skipping the gym. All I could think about was her. And Jason. And whether I was losing my mind or finally waking up to what had been happening all along. I think part of me was still hoping I was wrong. Even after all the hints, the suspicions, the shifts in behavior, I wanted there to be some twist ending. Some logical explanation that would make me feel stupid, maybe even embarrassed for doubting my wife. I would have taken that gladly if it meant the version of reality in my head could be shut down. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. That's when I decided I needed to see it with my own eyes. It started as a wild idea. Something you toss around in your head at 2 a.m. when sleep won't come and your mind is playing out every worst-case scenario on a loop. I remember sitting in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and whispering to myself, I just need to know. The opportunity came through a friend of a friend, a guy I used to lift weights with, actually. He worked for a local catering company that regularly staffed corporate events. And wouldn't you know it, Martha's company was hosting one that weekend. Big annual celebration, black tie, booze, fancy venue, the works. The kind of event where people loosen their ties, ditch the professional masks, and show who they really are when they think no one's watching. I asked my friend if they needed help. Actually, yeah, he said. Short one guy. Our assistant. Pays crap though. I'll take it, I said. Just tell them my name's Benjamin. That's how I ended up wearing a catering polo and a black baseball cap tucked behind a portable bar at the back of a conference room inside a hotel downtown. Name tag crooked. Hat pulled low. Nobody looked twice at me. I wasn't a guest. I was part of the background. Martha didn't recognize me. I watched her walk in, laughing at something Jason said. She looked stunning, elegant in a way that felt practiced, deliberate. Her hair curled just enough to look effortless. Red lipstick. Black dress that clung in places I knew too well. She looked like the version of herself I hadn't seen in months. The version that used to get excited for date nights with me. Jason was right beside her. Smug. Confident. Wearing a suit that probably cost more than our entire monthly rent. And his hand? His hand was resting on the small of her back. Lightly, casually, but like it belonged there. I nearly crushed the glass I was drying. But I kept it together. I stayed where I was, eyes locked on them, tracking every movement like I was watching a play and waiting for the final act. They mingled for a while, working the room like a power couple. Laughing too loud. Whispering in each other's ears. And then, about 45 minutes in, I saw it. She reached under the table and took his hand. Held it. Not for a second. Not in a friendly, joking way. Not a quick squeeze or a high five. She laced her fingers with his under the white linen like they were the only two people in the world. And then they left. Just stood up, mid-conversation, and walked out together. I watched them turn down the hallway past the coat check into a side corridor that led to the meeting rooms. I gave it a minute, then asked one of the other bartenders to cover for me and slipped out the side. I followed at a distance, every step feeling like a betrayal to myself. Like I didn't want to be there, didn't want to see it, but I had to. The hallway was quiet. Dimly lit. And about halfway down, I saw the door. Conference room B. Closed. Lights off behind the frosted glass. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 20. I wanted to knock. Wanted to throw the door open and see whatever was happening. But I didn't need to. When they finally came out, the look on their faces said everything. Martha's hair was tousled. Her lipstick had faded. She was smoothing the fabric of her dress like she'd just put it back on. Jason was fixing his collar, checking his reflection in the dark window. Neither of them spoke for a moment. They just stood there, then turned and walked back like it was nothing. When she re-entered the party, she grabbed a champagne flute, laughed at someone's joke, and acted like she hadn't just destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. And I stood in the shadows, frozen. There weren't words for what I felt in that moment. Not just anger. Not just heartbreak. Something deeper. Something like clarity. A kind of sick, brutal relief. Because now I knew. No more doubt. No more second-guessing myself. No more trying to twist my mind into pretzels to explain things away. I'd seen it. I clocked out early, turned in my apron, and walked 3 blocks in the cold just to clear my head. I didn't even remember how I got back to my car. It was like being underwater, every sound muffled, every breath a struggle. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. Place smelled like old cigarettes and disappointment, but it had a bed and it had a door I could lock behind me. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling again, but this time, the loop in my head was different. It wasn't speculation anymore. It was memory. Her hand in his. The closed door. The way she looked afterward. And I realized something that hurt more than anything else. She hadn't even tried to hide it. That's what got me. She didn't think I'd be there, of course. But even if I hadn't been, they weren't being careful. Not really. It was like they didn't need to be. Like they'd already written me out of the story and were just waiting for the credits to roll. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream into the pillow. Didn't punch the wall. I just sat there, phone in my lap, looking at our wedding photo, saved as my wallpaper like some kind of sick joke. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel confused. I felt focused. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I didn't go home the next morning either. I woke up in that cheap motel room with the thin curtains barely keeping out the gray light of day. My head ached. Not from drinking, I hadn't touched a drop, but from the mental hangover of everything I'd seen the night before. I stared at the water-stained ceiling and felt something I didn't expect to feel after witnessing my wife cheat on me. Stillness. Not peace. Not yet. But stillness. Like the noise had stopped. The loop of anxiety, suspicion, denial, it had gone silent. I had proof now. There was no going back. And with that came a kind of strange, mechanical clarity. The question wasn't, did she, anymore. It was, what now? I didn't call Martha. Didn't text her to say I was okay. Didn't tell her where I was. I knew her well enough to guess how she'd play it. She'd call, of course. Act concerned. Ask where I'd gone, maybe even sound genuinely worried. She'd feign confusion, pretend she had no idea what could be wrong. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. Instead, I stayed quiet. I extended the motel stay for another night and drove to the old part of town where my college buddy Sam worked in IT support for an internet service provider. Sam and I hadn't talked much lately, but back in the day, he was the guy who could jailbreak anything. The kind of guy who thought firewalls were just puzzles to keep things interesting. He owed me a favor. Man, he said, leaning back in his rolling chair as I explained the situation, you sure about this? I'm sure, I said. He sighed, tapped his keyboard, and looked me in the eye. Okay, I'll get you what I can. I'll pull the call records for the account. Just the logs, no audio. But I can't give you anything too crazy, all right? I like my job. I just need patterns, I said. Numbers. Timestamps. That afternoon, he handed me a printed spreadsheet. 10 pages. All calls and texts associated with the number registered under Martha's name. I thanked him, grabbed a greasy burger from a drive-thru, and went back to the motel. I spread the pages out on the bed like they were pieces of a crime scene, and in a way, they were. At first, it was a mess. Lines and numbers, a blur of contacts and durations. But then I saw them. Patterns. Recurrences. Late-night calls to a number saved in her phone as J-Work, Jason's number. Nearly every day. Sometimes twice. Sometimes at midnight. Sometimes at 6 a.m. There were also several unsaved numbers she contacted regularly, always after 10 p.m., always lasting more than 15 minutes. I cross-referenced one of them using a reverse lookup site and, surprise, surprise, it belonged to a corporate apartment rental service, likely one Jason used when he traveled between cities. Suddenly, the late meetings, the project crunch, the girls' nights, all of it started falling into place. The cologne. the change in wardrobe, her sudden insistence on needing space. This thing between them, it hadn't been a one-time lapse in judgment. It wasn't a fling. It was structured, ongoing, maintained. It had a rhythm. That hit me harder than I expected. It was one thing to imagine your spouse making a mistake. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a second life. And she was living it with him. I sat there for a long time, flipping through the call logs like they were diary entries. They told a story she hadn't. One with no heart emojis, no photos, no poetic goodbye. Just cold data. But somehow it felt more honest than anything Martha had said to my face. I remembered how a few months ago she told me she wanted to invest more in herself. That she needed to feel seen. At the time I thought she was talking about therapy. Or maybe art. I even looked into yoga classes she might like. But now I realized she'd already found something, or rather, someone to invest in. Jason. I didn't cry. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was pride. But my eyes stayed dry while my brain did all the bleeding. I started thinking about the little things I'd told myself were fine, her checking her phone in the bathroom, her silence at dinner, her telling me not to pick her up from events. I remembered the night we watched her favorite movie and she barely smiled at the parts she used to quote. How she kissed me afterward, but her mouth felt cold. Back then, I thought it was stress. Fatigue. Work. But now? Now I knew I was watching someone drift away and pretending it wasn't happening. The next day, I opened an old, dust-covered laptop I'd stopped using years ago. I didn't want to use our shared computer. I didn't want her IP to be part of what came next. I started pulling things apart. Went into our shared online storage accounts and reviewed old backups. There were photos that had been deleted from her phone but synced online by accident, candid ones taken from odd angles. Her feet up on a hotel balcony. A blurry image of Jason across a table. Her hand holding a wine glass with someone else's hand clearly brushing against hers. I saved them all. Created a folder on a flash drive and named it Insurance. Not out of revenge. Not because I wanted to destroy her. But because I needed to protect myself from the version of her that could smile and lie at the same time. Later that afternoon, I called my boss and said I needed a few days off. Told him it was a family emergency. He didn't ask questions. Then I did something that felt strange but necessary. I went off the grid. I turned off my phone. Deactivated social media. Cleared my location history from every app one could think of. I didn't want her to find me. I didn't want to hear her voice saying things that I couldn't unhear. Because I knew this part of the story wasn't about confrontation. Not yet. This part was about listening. Watching. Documenting. I wasn't trying to trap her. I was trying to understand how much of my life had been fake. Each morning, I woke up early. Took walks. Journaled. Wrote everything down, dates, behaviors, red flags I'd missed. The silence was deafening, but it also brought clarity. I started to see her not as my wife, but as a person making choices. Repeated choices. And me? I was the placeholder. The background noise. That realization stung. Because I loved her. Even then. Even in the middle of all of it. But I loved the her from before. The one who held my hand under restaurant tables. The one who couldn't fall asleep unless her feet touched mine. The one who cried with me when we put down our old dog. But that person was gone. Or maybe she was never real. By the time the motel told me I needed to either extend my stay or leave, I already had a plan forming in my head. A blueprint. A quiet withdrawal, like slipping out of a house that was already on fire. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to leave everything I didn't recognize behind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything, break dishes, or punch a wall. I think the version of me that might have done those things evaporated sometime between seeing Martha walk out of that conference room with her dress askew and staring at a spreadsheet of her call logs like they were the blueprints to my own humiliation. There was no room for rage anymore. Only calculation. That morning, still at the motel, I sat at the little laminate desk next to the window and opened my laptop. No distractions. No music. No TV murmuring in the background. Just the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the occasional whine of trucks passing on the highway. First, I logged into our bank. We had 2 accounts, one joint, one mine alone, opened years ago for freelance income, one never quite closed out. The joint account held most of our money, but the solo one? That had deposits from before the wedding, birthday gifts from my grandmother, refunds from old jobs. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I transferred it all out. Every last dollar. Clean, legal, traceable. No funny business. Then I logged out of every shared subscription we had. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, Amazon Prime. I changed the passwords. Revoked her access. These weren't acts of revenge. They were boundaries. They were me drawing a line in the sand. Next came the cloud accounts, our photo storage, our shared Google Drive folders with recipes and apartment lease documents and vacation itineraries from better years. I backed up everything personal to an external hard drive. Our wedding photos, her parents' anniversary party, that trip we took to Denver before things started unraveling. I stored it all, then removed her access from the originals. I wasn't trying to erase her. I was separating. I remember sitting back in the creaky motel chair, staring at the account access removed confirmations flooding my inbox. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt centered, like I was finally standing on solid ground. The next day, I made 2 appointments. One was with a divorce attorney, a woman named Valerie who had 5-star reviews, a no-nonsense reputation, and a law office that smelled like leather-bound war strategies. She didn't blink when I told her what I'd seen. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. I pulled out the flash drive and handed it over. She inserted it into her laptop and clicked through the folder labeled Insurance. She looked up at me halfway through, brows raised. "You've done most of the work already." "I wasn't looking to trap her," I said. "I just needed the truth." She nodded slowly. "Well, you have it. And that's a solid case for adultery in this state. It'll protect you in court, especially with asset division. You two don't have kids, right?" "No," I said. "We were talking about it." She said she wanted to wait until her work stabilized. Valerie's mouth tightened into a line. "Smart woman," she said. But it wasn't a compliment. The second appointment was with another kind of lawyer. Financial planning and protection. I wanted to know how to legally withdraw from the small business project Martha and I had started together back in the early days of our marriage. A modest but meaningful investment, a product idea we co-developed, mostly mine, but marketed under both our names. He looked over the paperwork and said, "If you want out, I can make that happen, but you'll be walking away from future profits." I didn't hesitate. "Let her have them." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Positive," I said. "I don't want ties. I don't want to spend the next 10 years watching her success and wondering if she's thanking him for it over wine in another hotel room." He didn't say anything to that, just scribbled on a legal pad and slid a document across the table. By the end of the week, I'd signed the necessary forms to sever my financial, legal, and emotional liabilities from the life I used to call mine. And for the first time in months, maybe longer, I slept. Not well. Not peacefully, but without interruption, without waking up in a panic at 3 a.m. and checking to see if Martha was still breathing beside me, without looking at her and wondering which version of her was real, the one who used to dance barefoot in our kitchen or the one who slipped away to dark rooms with her boss. That weekend, I found a studio apartment on the other side of town. Small, unfurnished, the kind of place that didn't come with echoes of another person's voice. I signed the lease and paid the deposit with my own money. I didn't tell anyone. Not friends. Not coworkers. Not even my parents. This was mine. A reset button I pressed in secret. When I walked into that apartment for the first time, keys in hand, the place smelling like fresh paint and hollow air, I didn't feel sad. I felt free. It wasn't just about Martha. It was about all the parts of myself I'd set aside to be the good husband. The guy who forgives, who listens, who waits up late to talk through her stress. Who picks up groceries on his way home even though she's the one with the flexible hours. Who steps back when her job gets demanding. Who makes peace with emotional leftovers because, hey, love is sacrifice, right? But love isn't supposed to feel like starvation. I looked around the empty apartment and thought, this is where I stopped starving. Later that night, I checked my phone for the first time in days. 47 missed calls. Mostly from her. Some from unknown numbers. I didn't listen to the voicemails. Just read the transcripts. "Mark, please? I don't know where you are. I'm worried. Can we talk? This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. I told you it wasn't serious. I deserve a chance to explain. At least give me that. I don't even know what you think you saw, but you're blowing it out of proportion. I'm sorry, okay? Can we just talk like adults? Please. I miss you. I love you. Don't do this. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her. Not because I wanted to hurt her. But because there was nothing she could say that would make me unsee what I saw. Words are powerful until your eyes tell you the truth. Then words are just noise. She made her choices, carefully, repeatedly, and without hesitation. All I was doing now was making mine. On Sunday evening, I packed a few bags and returned to our house for the last time. She wasn't there. She'd gone to stay at a friend's place, probably assuming I needed space to cool off. No. I was just getting ready to walk out. For good. A week after I'd gone silent, I returned to the house, not to reconcile, not to confront, just to pick up the rest of my things. I wanted it over. Clean. Quiet. Martha was there when I arrived. She must have been tracking my location again or waiting by the window hoping to catch me. She opened the door before I even rang the bell. Her face was soft, almost rehearsed, like she'd practiced looking vulnerable in the mirror. "Mark," she said, her voice low. "You're here." I walked past her without a word, heading straight to the bedroom closet. My suit jackets, old books, a box of tools. I kept my focus on the task. I wasn't going to get pulled into another emotional maze. But of course, she followed me. "I didn't know how to reach you," she said. "I've been calling, texting. I even tried emailing. I zipped my duffel bag. I saw." She hovered near the doorway. "I didn't think things were that bad. I thought you just needed space." "Space," I repeated. "That's what you said you wanted, right?" Her lip trembled. "Mark, I know you're angry. But you saw one moment, just one, and you ran. You didn't even give me a chance to explain." I stopped packing for a moment and turned to her. "No," I said. "I gave you months of chances. I saw the signs. I asked. You lied. You told me Jason flirts with everyone. You said it was a joke." She opened her mouth to respond, but I kept going. "Then I watched you walk into a room with him and come back out fixing your makeup. There's no speech that makes that look innocent." She stepped forward. "It wasn't like that. I was going through something and he was just there. I didn't plan any of it." I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, she didn't look like my wife. She looked like someone trying to control damage. Like someone who finally understood that this wasn't a fight, this was the fallout. "You said he flirts with everyone," I said calmly. "So I watched. Just once. That was all I needed." Silence. Then her voice cracked. "I was lonely, Mark. You were always working. You were tired all the time." I almost laughed. "So were you. That's what you kept saying, just tired. Every night you came home late. Every time you brushed off questions." She had no more defense. "Only soft please now. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." I grabbed my last bag, zipped it closed, and turned toward the door. She didn't follow this time. She just stood there, her mouth twitching like she was trying to form one more excuse and couldn't find the words. I paused at the threshold. "I didn't leave because of Jason," I said. "I left because I watched who you became when you thought I wasn't looking." I left without another word. The door clicked shut behind me and I didn't look back. The studio was small but quiet. Mine. I filled it with second-hand furniture and blank walls that didn't carry memories. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not her parents. Not mine. Not mutual friends. I let the silence do what words never could. At first, Martha texted every day. The messages varied: apologies, accusations, nostalgia. Then came Jason. His were smug. Smiley. Like he thought he'd won something. But there was nothing left to take. Eventually, I stopped reading the messages. I turned the phone off and left it in a drawer. Changed the number a week later. I didn't leave her out of cruelty. I didn't disappear out of spite. I left the version of myself that tolerated being gaslit, ignored, and rewritten. That door didn't just close behind me. It sealed. And in that silence, I found something better than closure. I found myself again.